Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us and welcome to our webinar this evening, Sober Curious with Debbie Johnston. My name is Nicole Imgrand and I'm the owner of River's Edge Counseling Center. And this webinar this evening is part of a series of Wellness Matters webinars. We have held well over 100 of them already. We have about 60 or 70 of them that are actually online. If you go to our website, you can see past ones. We also have quite a few coming up. We have these webinars a couple of times a month, and we have a really exciting lineup for winter and spring. So I'll just take a minute, if you don't mind, just letting you know what some of our upcoming topics are. The next one is Oh No, the Teenage Years Approach with Cynthia Smith. And then starting in the new year, we have one on sex therapy, what it is and how it can help, boundary setting, how and where to draw your lines, chewing the fat, compassionately unpacking systemic and cultural fat phobia. Love the title of that one. The Journey to Becoming a Step Family, which is actually an in-person talk. We have a couple that are going to be in person in our space at River's Edge as well. And the one after that on cultural influences on mental health is in person as well. Those are more limited for participants, so make sure you sign up ahead. And there's 4 or 5 more after that too. So it's going to be a really full winter and spring. So I hope that you'll feel free to join us again anytime. I'm just going to share with you a little bit about Debbie before we get started. Debbie is a registered clinical social worker. She has over 20 years of experience working on the front line and operational levels, both in the criminal justice and mental health systems. Debbie has been with River's Edge. How long now, Debbie?
Just over a year.
Over a year. Yeah, we're so fortunate to have her on our team. And Debbie has a really lots of breadth in her practice. She works with adults, also with youth and families and couples. Her approach is to meet clients where they are at, and Debbie creates a supportive and empowering environment for them. In a really safe and non-judgmental space, Debbie walks alongside her clients to explore their desire and capacity for change. She draws on a number of different approaches to find one that is the best fit for each client, because we know everyone is different in terms of how they experience change in their life. Some of the modalities she draws on are CBT, emotionally focused therapy, compassion focused therapy, EMDR, motivational interviewing, and also solution focused therapy. She is a 20-year resident of St. Albert, and she has a very busy life when she is not working in her private practice as well. She is married and has 2 teenage kids and also 2 dogs. So there's a lot of people to keep track of in her life, professionally and personally. So Debbie's talk tonight isn't going to quite take the hour, so we're going to have some time for questions. You can put questions in the Q&A, or you can just put them in the chat, and Debbie and I will be able to see them. If you'd like to change your name to anonymous, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, you know already that you don't have access to your camera or your microphone, but we will see the comments that you make. While Debbie's presenting, I'll keep my eye on the chat in case you need anything from me. And otherwise, at the end of the hour, we'll take a look at what comments and questions there are together. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Debbie.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Nicole. Welcome, everybody. It's truly an honor to present on this topic. I think this topic is pretty near and dear to a lot of us, having gone through a pandemic and just going through some of the trials and tribulations of life. So I'm going to share my screen here to my presentation. I am not technologically very advanced. I was testing maybe taking off my glasses because I see a bad glare, but then I cannot see my presentation. So just bear with me as best we can. So I will start here.
You're sharing. I'm just going to tell people, because people don't always know this. Do you see beside the views of Debbie and I, there's a vertical line. If you put your mouse on that and drag it, that's a way that you can, if you want to make your view of Debbie a little bit bigger to see her, you can, or to make the slide a bit bigger too. So you can play with that. And with that, I will get out of your way.
Okay. All right. Now all right. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's wellness talk. My name, as Nicole said, is Debbie Johnstone, and I'm a registered clinical social worker here at River's Edge Counseling Center. I work with adults, I work with couples, families, teens, and a lot of my practice over the years has been working with addictions and substance use. Substance use kind of runs the gamut, a large continuum of use, but very relevant for a lot of people. So today I'm going to be talking about this idea of sober curious and what it is. So I will, first of all, let's see if, nope, that didn't work. I have to get to the next, hang on one sec. I think I figured it out. There we go. Okay, so today's outline. So just an overview of tonight's session, providing an introduction to the topic and why I chose it, providing a bit of a disclaimer around what this webinar is and that it is informational purposes only. We're going to discuss the normalization of alcohol and alcohol's negative effects. We're going to define what sober curious is, explore its benefits, and how to identify how to become curious. We're going to look at, I'm going to share with you some of the sources that I pulled the information from, as well as I'll share some others that's available online. There will be some room for some questions at the end, and then I will share my contact information. So I apologize, guys. Again, I'm not the most technologically advanced. So I'm going between two laptops here. So introduction, why this topic? So as I alluded to initially at the beginning, so for many of us, COVID saw an increase in our alcohol consumption. We were dealing with lockdowns and boredom and working from home and being isolated. I remember Zoom get-togethers with friends and family and having, sort of virtual toasts. We see alcohol use regularly. We see many, and as we see on this slide here, memes about the alcohol humor, the mummy wine culture, the proliferation, most recently, the craft beer market. Alcohol, those are just two examples, but alcohol has always been and largely remains very normalized in our society. All of this, so sort of with COVID and the normalization of alcohol, I think there was sort of a accumulation of a number of factors that left a lot of us questioning why we drink and the role that alcohol plays in our lives. Today, we're going to explore what that relationship looks like. We're going to get clear on kind of some of the emotional and physiological effects of alcohol. We're going to examine how prominent of a role alcohol plays in our life and in our society. We're going to briefly look at the impact that alcohol has on our body. We're going to define what sober curious is and explore what it would look like to become curious about our alcohol use. And ultimately, tonight's session is really going to be a journey that empowers us just to examine our own relationship with alcohol. I have no agenda here. I'm not going to tell you whether you need to abstain or whether moderate. I'm just here to provide you with information. So, disclaimer. So the following presentation is provided for information purposes only, and it does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It's important to note that for a person who has become physically or psychologically dependent on alcohol, abruptly quitting can result in serious medical complications. As such, any attempts to reduce or eliminate for those individuals should be done under the proper supervision of a qualified treatment provider. Okay, all of that being said, this presentation is intended for those individuals who have started to kind of wonder or explore or question what role alcohol has in their life. So let's talk about the normalization of alcohol. So alcohol is widely normalized within our society. We know that as a society, it has been largely normalized from when we are children. It's considered a normal part of social interactions, festive celebrations, cultural events, and meals. It's often depicted as a necessary or glamorous part of everyday life. It's often presented as a rite of passage for teens and young adults. And like I said, from childhood to present day, we've observed, with very few exceptions, many people appearing to enjoy alcohol. What's interesting to note that in Alberta, alcohol is the most used intoxicating substance. Now, in January of 2023, much to everyone's shock, the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, the CCSA, released revised guidelines on alcohol consumption and stated clearly that all alcohol use comes with risk. The guidelines were amended to state that there is now a continuum of risk associated with weekly alcohol consumption. So they're saying that any alcohol consumption, there is a risk associated with it, but it is on a continuum. So as such, what the guidelines state is that considered low risk is for those individuals who consume a maximum of 2 drinks per week. Moderate risk are for those who consume 3 to 6 drinks per week. So that is per week. And an increasingly high risk is for those that consume 7 or more drinks per week. Further, this comes right from the CCSA, but basically what this guideline is telling us is that in order to minimize the risks associated with drinking, the CCSA recommends no more than 2 alcoholic drinks per week. This is a dramatic reduction from the previous recommendation of 15 drinks per week for men and 10 for women. So it is also important to note that, like, in doing my research, I saw that the guidelines in the US are much more like Canada's previous guidelines. So what Canada's current guidelines are saying do seem to contradict, and it seems a bit confusing. I think nonetheless, as this isn't a scientific talk or medical advice, it's just important to note that now, as we realize and learn more about alcohol, that the lowest risk is 2 or less drinks per week. The next thing, though, that is really important to note is for these guidelines, talking about what a standard drink is. Standard drinks are not the supersized ones that many of us have come to be familiar with. I'm going to date myself here, but I am born and raised Edmontonian, and Purple Onion and Southside Edmonton used to have 3-for-1s. That is not a standard size drink. What a standard size drink is 1 bottle or can of beer or cider with an average alcohol rate of 5%, 1.5 ounces of liquor, which I found that a little shocking because I thought it would be 1, and 5 ounces of wine. So what's interesting, I am a wine drinker and I enjoy my wine. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine, so your standard wine bottle, holds 5 glasses of wine. That is not that is not the 3 glasses that I have previously consumed in my bottles. But anyways, I'm using some humor here. Some statistics. So no presentation is complete without the boring statistics, but I think these ones are pretty relevant. So in 2018, interesting, that's when COVID started, 76% of Canadians consumed alcohol. Over a 1-year period between 2018 and 2019, individuals over the legal drinking age consumed approximately 9.5 standard drinks per week. 80% of those individuals aged 15 and up consumed alcoholic beverages. And in January 2021, 66% of Canadians aged 15 and above reported consuming alcohol at least once in the previous month. Almost 20% of alcohol consumers aged 12 and above are considered heavy drinkers. So this just kind of gives us a little bit of an idea about what what that looks like. So the negative effects of alcohol. So again, I'm not here to frighten everyone or use scare tactics, but this is the reality of what the research says. Alcohol has been named the world's #1 killer. It has been scored as the most harmful drug. Second was heroin, and third was cocaine. Alcohol destroys our health by attacking our liver, our immune system, and is related to more than 60 diseases. Alcohol is both water and fat soluble, which means it passes into all cells, tissues, and organs in the human body. When alcohol is ingested, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, alcohol in and of itself is a toxic poison, just to the human tissue, body tissue. However, when alcohol is ingested, it in and of itself, as a toxic substance, is converted into another substance, which is also a higher level of poison and toxicity and indiscriminately kills all cells. So there's not a lot of positives that I've been able to locate. All right, so this is Dr. Andrew Huberman. He is a neuroscientist. Many of you might be familiar with him. He hosts a podcast on a variety of health-related issues. Episode 86 of his podcast talks about alcohol in your health. And what's really important, he goes very scientific, and I will gloss over that because that isn't the point of this presentation. But what is really important from his podcast is that drinking 1 to 2 drinks per night. So that's 1 or 2 glasses of wine. So, a glass of wine when you come home from work and a spirit after sitting on the couch, that is considered a chronic level of alcohol consumption. Now, he further qualifies that to say it's either 1 to 2 drinks per night or 14 drinks per week. So say you don't drink Monday to Friday, or Monday to Thursday, Sunday to Thursday, but Friday and Saturday, you have 7 drinks each. You are still within that chronic category. He also refers to heavy pattern of use as being 3 to 4 drinks per night, or 12 to 24 drinks per week. Both the chronic level and the heavy level of alcohol consumption lead to neural degeneration, which is degeneration of the brain. And that's what we're going to talk about first. So the brain and alcohol's impacts on it. So as I said, neural degeneration, that's a breakdown of the brain. His podcast goes into a lot of detail about what happens there, but suffice it to state that it negatively affects the brain. It interferes with our ability to behave, to think, and to interact socially. It also impedes the natural capacity to remember, learn, and solve problems. Now, dopamine. So this is a really important piece to mention after talking about the brain, because we hear a lot about dopamine in the news, in literature. This is the feel-good chemical. So what happens when alcohol is ingested is we have a surge in dopamine. We have a surge in feeling good. So the ingestion of alcohol results in an initial increase of dopamine, which results in an increased level of motivation, energy, well-being, feeling good, a mild euphoria. When we ingest alcohol, not only do we get an increase in dopamine, but we also get an increase in serotonin, which is another neurotransmitter in the brain. Related, often people will know this through anxiety or depression, or those that are prescribed SSRIs or antidepressants. So when we ingest the alcohol, we get this initial increase in dopamine. We also get this increase in serotonin, which also contributes to a short-lived increase in well-being and mood. Now, following that initial surge of the dopamine and the serotonin, alcohol leaves the body and it leaves the brain. And what happens in that process is that the reduction of the dopamine and the serotonin occurs over a long, slow process. And so what Dr. Huberman states is that we ingest alcohol, We get this initial blip of feeling good because of the dopamine and serotonin. But then it is followed by this sort of long, slow, reducing, deteriorating period of feeling good. So we feel good, and then we feel bad for an extended period of time. Now, alcohol also affects our heart. It weakens our heart muscle, making it impossible to continue contracting effectively, making it unable to transport enough oxygen to our organs and our tissues. It also releases stress hormones that constrict blood vessels, elevates our blood pressure, and causes hypertension. The big one, the liver. So the liver metabolizes alcohol by taking, as I previously said, an already toxic substance and converting it into an even more toxic substance. There's names for this, academic scientific names. I will save you from that. I probably won't be able to pronounce them properly. But what happens when this occurs, so we have a toxic substance being converted into more of a toxic substance in order to be metabolized, is this causes damage to our liver cells, results in inflammation, weakens our body's natural defenses, and this inflammation over time causes scar tissue. Alcohol also contributes to the creation of a fatty liver. Many of us, particularly as we get older, we get our blood results back and we have an increase in fatty liver enzymes. With respect to the scar tissue, so some scar tissue within the liver from alcohol as one contributor is known as fibrosis. That over time can cause bigger scar tissue, which becomes cirrhosis. We all know cirrhosis of the liver is a chronic disease of alcohol. And essentially what happens there is it prevents the liver from performing critical functioning, including managing infections, absorbing nutrients, and removing toxins from the blood. Ultimately, this can lead to liver cancer and type 2 diabetes. And it is estimated that 25% of heavy drinkers, so if we go back to Dr. Huberman's, who is a heavy drinker, that was the 12 to 24 a week, 4 to 6 per night. 25% of heavy drinkers will develop cirrhosis. So the risks are high. When we look at alcohol and cancer, this has really come out with the guidelines back in January 2023, just sort of a media push around this. Alcohol was declared a carcinogen in 1998. The more alcohol we drink, we have an increased risk of cancer. Why is that? Because alcohol has that effect on every cell and increases tumor growth. So it, as I said earlier, permeates all cells within the body. So therefore, it subjects all of them to risk. Dr. Huberman states that ingesting 1 drink per day is roughly the same as smoking 10 cigarettes a day regarding cancer risk. So again, I'm saying all of this, it sounds very frightening, but this is about providing information, sharing what the facts say. So sleep. Often when we drink alcohol, we think, oh yeah, well, basically we drink and we go to sleep and quickly fall asleep. What happens though, when we have alcohol in the system, it impacts our slow wave, our deep sleep, and our REM sleep and disrupts all of them. When we ingest higher amounts of alcohol, we actually don't sleep, but we experience what's called pseudo sleep, almost like a low-level hypnotic trance, where we experience multiple bouts of waking without realizing. So what happens is we go to sleep under the influence. We have this very disruptive sleep. We're not hitting all of those required sleep stages that we need. And we wake up feeling pretty unrested. Okay, here's the bad part of alcohol, right? The after effects, the hangover. I'm assuming that many of us that have experienced some type of alcohol intoxication have also experienced a hangover. And what a hangover is it's really a constellation of effects. So we experience headaches, we experience nausea, we also experience anxiety. The literature actually refers to anxiety as hangxiety because of the hangover effect of increased anxiety. Why hangovers happen is caused by the vasoconstriction, which occurs as a rebound after drinking. We experience a general low mood, we're tired, we're sluggish, we've got a headache. And over time, these hangover experiences, these after effects, kind of mount and accumulate. We feel sluggish, we feel stressed, we feel chronically tired, and that all kind of becomes our new normal. Ongoing drinking also affects our well being, with alcohol being a major cause of depression. So, the cumulative effects of alcohol, particularly in sort of the sense of experiencing a hangover, also makes it difficult for us to cope with everyday stressors. Alcohol depresses our central nervous system, which really increases depression and anxiety. So quite often after a heavy night of drinking, or even when we experience a mild hangover, the next day we will feel empty, we will feel anxious, we'll feel insecure. Um, and those are the after effects. Okay, so let's talk about alcohol use patterns. So this is where we kind of look in the literature at what patterns of use look like. And so what the literature says is that, like the risk, use also occurs on a continuum that typically fall includes like the following categories that I'll describe. So we've got our first group that are the abstainers or the non-users. So obviously they're not even on the continuum. We then have low risk, or those that engage in social drinking. So this is those that occasionally consume and really don't experience any of the negative consequences. This is likely where the maximum of 2 drinks per week would fit. We then go up to the starting to, I guess, sort of expose ourselves into more at risk or hazardous drinking. So this is where we see that alcohol consumption starts to increase our risk of harm. That harm can come in many different forms, but exceeding the recommended limits can also result in us engaging in more riskier behavior, whatever that can look like, a multitude of things. We then go into sort of the problematic use or the harmful use. And this is where we see that drinking patterns are resulting in physical or mental harms, even if they don't necessarily meet the criteria of alcohol dependence. So we might be experiencing some health problems, some social problems, or some other negative consequences. We then get into the stage of dependence. This can be all the way up to having alcohol use disorder, but it is basically a chronic condition characterized by an inability to control or stop our drinking. We've developed a tolerance, so we need more alcohol to achieve the same effects. We can experience withdrawal symptoms when we're not drinking. Those don't always happen. And we can experience a preoccupation with either wanting alcohol or figuring out when we're going to not drink alcohol, but it's more present in our day-to-day. Dependence in and of itself is more of a severe form of alcohol use disorder, where we have the physiological dependence. And then finally, what also is not on this continuum here on the slide is recovery. So that is the stage for those individuals who were previously dependent on alcohol, but are actively maintaining a lifestyle of abstinence or controlled drinking. So it is important to note that the continuum is not always linear. Sorry, my apologies. Individuals may move back and forth between categories depending on various factors. So yeah, it's not that it just goes from one extreme to the other. Okay, so important to note that addiction, as the slide shows here, addiction doesn't discriminate, and alcoholism is an equal opportunity destroyer. So alcohol is an addictive substance. Its effects, so its chemical components and its physiological effects on the human body occur indiscriminately, meaning that over time, And with the right level of exposure, anyone can develop a dependence on it. No one is immune from an addiction to alcohol. The more you drink, the more you will want to drink. And it's also important to note that no one ever plans to become an alcoholic. There is no inexplicable defect in our personalities. Sometimes you hear people say, oh, I'm not like them, or I don't have the personality, the addictive personality. There is actually no defect in our personalities. There's no elusive flaw in our bodies. The addictive nature of alcohol is not at all dependent on who is consuming it. Alcohol is simply a highly addictive drug. So the difference between an alcoholic and a moderate drinker is only how addicted they have become and how quickly. So again, if we look at this substance and we kind of remove all the personal, the normalization of it, the fun experiences we've had, how we use it to, sort of enhance different social experiences, we look at it just as the substance. We see that regardless, this is an addictive substance. So how far an individual progresses on the alcohol continuum is really what differentiates a person that is an alcoholic versus a moderate drinker. We must accept the fact that alcohol cannot change its nature if it's consumed by an alcoholic or a moderate drinker. It is the same substance with the same addictive qualities. So for the most part, everyone who drinks now is drinking more than they used to. So if you're regularly drinking alcohol and you look back 5 years, for the most part, obviously there are exceptions, but you will probably recognize that you can drink more, or that you having, more regularly engage in alcohol use. What's also important to note is that if you are drinking at a regular rate right now and you make no changes, so say, you know what, every night I come home from work and I have 2 drinks, in 5 years, you will be consuming more. That's just how alcohol works. We are conditioned to believe that alcohol provides enjoyment or relief, and that it helps us enjoy life and ease our stress. When we have a drink, we begin to feel more relaxed, confident, and in control. And since this relief is real because of the physiological changes in the brain, we believe the drink is providing enjoyment. Over time, our tolerance increases. What does tolerance mean? It's the reduced effects of alcohol with repeated exposure. So needing to consume more of a substance in order to achieve those intoxicating effects. Tolerance is a direct consequence of the toxicity of alcohol. So the body becomes adjusted in order to try to maintain baseline. And if you recall, so with tolerance, what happens when we talked about that initial blip of dopamine and serotonin and that long sort of reduction? With tolerance, what it means is that initial blip is even shorter, and that long, slow reduction descent of not feeling good is even longer. And so this is just physiologically how this substance is metabolized and occurs within the human body. It's important to talk about cravings because when we're not drinking, we can get to the point of believing that we're missing something. So if you're a regular consumer of alcohol, you come home from work and you have a glass of wine, you get to the point of believing you're missing something if you don't come home and have that glass of wine. Part of that is emotion, part of that is habitual. That isn't necessarily physiological. But when we say to ourselves, you know what, I'm going to cut out. I'm not going to have that wine. Or maybe I have 2 glasses of wine a night. I'm not going to have that. But so depriving ourselves of that can create both physiological, if we are physiologically dependent, but also a psychological sense of emptiness. So we get this feeling of discomfort. So cravings in and of itself is an extremely strong and illogical desire to drink. When we are between drinks, so if we've gone out for a night of drinking and we're between drinks, the body will crave another drink. And if we don't satisfy that craving, the body will we'll still want it. And so we'll send messages, oh, I'll get another one. And quite often we fall into this pattern. So a craving when unsatisfied can become stronger. So that really, like, that's what the fixation is on. Is, oh, I got to get another drink. I've got to, it's going to be last call. I've got to call for another one. But what happens with the craving is it's not that the drink itself doesn't provide the enjoyment. What the drink does is it relieves that nuisance of wanting the drink. So we're kind of drinking to end the wanting. But if you have ever experienced an intense craving, you'll know that the craving itself is not pleasurable. Craving something is very different from liking it. So the deception is the belief that alcohol itself provides the enjoyment and the relief, but it doesn't. Alcohol does not satisfy your desire for alcohol. It is what created your desire for alcohol. So when we talk about all of this and we start to begin to look at what our consumption's like, and we can start to begin to question our consumption and realize maybe we're not fully in control of how much we're drinking. We might ask ourselves, when did it slide? Was it COVID? Was it the third lockdown? What was it? But drinking has become part of our lives that even though we never made a conscious decision necessarily to drink as much as we do, it has happened. So we have come to the point we've determined, okay, alcohol is causing us some problem in some way. Either I'm just not satisfied with how much I'm drinking, or it's bigger, or I just want to make some changes. But then our efforts to cut back have kind of taken the joy out of it because we're cutting back, but we're wanting it and we're thinking about it. So we're no longer enjoying it. And the drinking, when we do drink, we're starting to feel like a little bit, it's not bringing the satisfaction. We might, wake up in the morning and be like, oh, why did I drink that? Why did I drink last night? So there can be some regret. We can be really quite upset or, beat ourselves up when we give in. But then also can't understand why we can't not drink. So both the misery of abstinence and the pleasure of drinking are real and intense. All right, this brings us to Sober Curious. I'm just going to take a drink of my bubbly, even though it's not sponsored by this, but so what is Sober Curious? So Sober Curious is a term that means questioning our relationship with alcohol and thinking about reduced intake, moderation, or even complete abstinence, even if we're not necessarily ready to commit to it. Sober curiosity is often defined as having the option to choose, to question, or to change our drinking habits for health-focused reasons. The Sober Curious movement has encouraged individuals to recognize the often unhealthy habits that are associated with alcohol, as well as the effects. Sober Curious simply means that you're considering a change in your level of drinking for personal or wellness reasons. It involves curiosity about the reasons fueling your desire to drink and the way alcohol affects your life. What does sober curious mean? So the idea is to be mindful and consider the reasons you drink rather than just mindlessly drinking. Everyone goes out for, say, goes out on a Friday evening after work. It's just not automatically ordering the drink. Why do I want to drink? What do I want to drink? Would I like something different? Would I like dessert instead? So just sort of some different thought processes. The goal is not necessarily abstinence, but rather promoting responsible and informed decision making regarding our alcohol consumption. It encourages people to be mindful of their choices and understand how those choices may impact their health and well-being. And going sober curious really allows you the opportunity to see how sobriety or moderation might fit into your life. So it kind of starts with questioning and exploring. We begin to question, what is normal drinking? Why is alcohol everywhere? What would it be like to never wake up with a hangover? We may have some concern about alcohol's impact on our life and have started to question the drinking culture and our own patterns of use. We ask ourselves, would life be better without alcohol? Is alcohol preventing me from being fully present in my life? It's important to understand why we drink. Is it to relieve stress, to engage socially, or to liven up a party? Being sober curious allows us to weigh the pros and cons of drinking and determine the role we want alcohol to have in our life. This questioning allows us to explore what truly brings meaning to our lives, to seek the clarity to make the life choices that are better aligned with our individual needs, wants, and values. So, sober curious, is it a movement? Is it a trend? I think it's kind of all of it, right? As we see here in the graphic, right? We've got dry January, we've got sober October, we've got dry February, and Homer saying, woohoo, it's the shortest month. Um, but really, what all of this is it was a growing group of individuals who opted to drink less or not at all as a lifestyle choice. The movement pushes back at that normalization of heavy drinking and the stereotypes that those who do not drink are less social or have less fun. It is a lifestyle choice or a trend where individuals explore and question their relationship with alcohol without necessarily committing to complete abstinence. The trend has gained popularity as part of a broader cultural shift towards wellness and mindful living. Being sober curious allows us to be more mindful of our alcohol consumption. Again, questioning those societal norms around drinking, exploring alternative ways of socializing, and finding and exploring ways to find joy without relying on alcohol. Sober curious is really a personal journey. It is no one size fits all approach. It's you find what works best for you and what aligns best with your overall well being goals. But the practice itself is often embraced as a way to reset habits, promote healthier lifestyle, and possibly address concerns related to alcohol consumption. The different trends like sober October, dry January, those create space to talk openly about our relationships with alcohol. And such events are used to reevaluate our relationship with alcohol, improve our physical and mental health, and support others in a shared goal. So, why would I do this sober curious thing? Should I give it a try? Maybe you're questioning whether your drinking habits are enriching or complicating your life. Or maybe you're curious about the health perks of an alcohol free lifestyle. Or maybe you just want to take a break from alcohol. No matter the reason, being sober curious allows you to opt out without swearing off alcohol altogether. It involves personal choice, and individuals may have different reasons for exploring this lifestyle. You may explore it for health and wellness, you may explore it for mental clarity, or for personal growth. It doesn't necessarily mean complete abstinence, but rather a conscious and intentional approach to our consumption. Many sober, curious people who notice troubling patterns in their alcohol use find that a few weeks or months of sobriety helps them practice a more moderate and mindful drinking moving forward. Some people use it as a springboard to make longer term changes in their habits or to kickstart a healthier lifestyle. What are the benefits of sober curious? Well, there's health benefits. Obviously, taking a break can lead to improvements in physical health, such as better sleep, increased energy, potential weight loss. There's benefits to our mental well being. It provides us clarity on how it affects our mood, anxiety, and overall mental well being. Financially, it can add up to some significant savings over time. Social and peer support, there can be a new sense of community. Many people choose to sort of engage in these challenges together, and offering mutual support and encouragement is really, really a great way to kind of just work together. And another benefit is it can be a personal challenge. It's a way to set and achieve a goal and an opportunity to develop healthier habits. Specific positive effects of not drinking: regular, deep, restorative sleep, improved digestion, clear skin, increased energy, increased confidence, increased productivity, better mental health, increased optimism and energy and excitement, decreased risk of disease, money savings, better concentration and memory, stronger immune system, lower cardiovascular risk. The benefits and effects go on and on. How do we do it? So, how do you become sober curious? So, really, it starts with adopting a more mindful and intentional approach to drinking, kind of changing our mental perspective and determining is what role alcohol is playing for us, seeing alcohol for the toxic, addictive, and poisonous substance that it is. And again, not saying that to scare you, but if we look at the substance as what it is a toxic, poisonous, addictive substance. Once the mental and unconscious desire goes, any cravings that are purely physical last only as long as you're healing. Alcohol takes between 72 and 240 hours to leave the body. So that's between 3 and 10 days. It can take up to 10 days to recover from the lows of drinking. And it's important to remember that you're changing your entire life. It may take some getting used to. You might crave a drink, but approach the craving rationally, making a fact-based decision. By recalling all of the truths about alcohol, its nature, toxicity, and addictive qualities, you're not succumbing to unconscious and unexplainable desires to drink. And you can just sort of put the cravings in their place. By focusing on what you gain rather than on what you lose can also help. So steps, how do we do this? I think the first thing that is important to do is really reflect on your relationship with alcohol. Reflect on what current habits are like. How are they impacting your life physically, mentally, emotionally? And consider your motivation for wanting to explore sobriety. Set clear intentions. Define your goals. Define your intentions. If you're looking to reduce or take a break or explore sobriety, really being clear on those goals can help guide your journey. Educate yourself. As in attending this webinar, learning about the benefits of reducing or eliminating alcohol from your life. Find support. Seek support from others, friends, family, sober community. Help to provide encouragement and guidance. Experiment with non-alcoholic alternatives. This industry is booming. Engage in mindful practice. So mindfulness very much helps us get in the moment, stay in our current and present, and being aware of our thoughts and feelings. Going to yoga, doing some meditation, engaging in something that really grounds you. Socializing mindfully. So if social events typically involve alcohol, find alternative activities or places where you can socialize without there being an emphasis on drinking. Track your progress, track days, experiences, changes noticed. This can help reinforce our commitment and serve as a reminder of the positive effects. If needed, seek professional guidance. If this is challenging, considering seeking support from a therapist or your doctor. And finally, be patient and kind to yourself. Changing habits takes time. It's important to be patient and compassionate with ourselves, celebrate our successes, and learn from any setbacks. Couple of notes. Willpower. So a lot of people talk about willpower when trying to make any significant changes. It's important to note that willpower is a muscle that fatigues and eventually runs out. When quitting is hard, it reinforces our belief that alcohol holds a great deal of power over us. When you stop drinking through sheer willpower, you become healthier and your situation improves. Over time, the reasons you quit maybe are not as in the forefront as they were initially. You're running on this willpower. You feel strong and healthy, and you're empowered because of your strength to quit. We often then forget the reasons why we stepped away. And with just the human brain and our selective memory, which takes over, we begin kind of to longingly recall positive memories of alcohol. We tell ourselves, maybe I could have just one, maybe now I can moderate. You'll find an excuse for that first one. And for many, that first one turns to several. And then suddenly we're back in sort of that mental cycle. When you completely change your mental perspective on alcohol, you see it for what it is, you see what role it's having in your life, you start to see the truth about it. When this happens, no willpower is required, and it becomes easier to not drink. Another important thing to talk about and make note of is moderation. So often in health literature, we talk about moderation, whether it's exercise or eating or diets, everything in moderation. Moderation is hard. It's important to be wary of it with alcohol. There's no halfway once you have established a habit, once you have become even emotionally dependent on something. Your brain has physically and chemically changed, which makes moderation very difficult. We usually impose some rules upon ourselves. I won't drink on the weekend. I'll only drink wine. I won't drink if I've got something the next day. The problem is, all of those self imposed rules are easily broken. And when we break one of those rules, it follows that we'll break the next and the next, no matter how hard we try not to. We then feel bad that we failed. So we end up drinking more, not to feel those feelings. So forcing yourself to moderate and stick to rules is exhausting. You try to white knuckle it through the dry days. You're always engaging in negative self talk or battling with the voice in your head of when you can give in, when you can have one, when you need to not have one. You end up feeling worse about yourself. And then guess what? You end up drinking more. So I wanted to draw some of the attention to some of the sources that I used for this presentation. As I said, the Huberman Lab. There's a big, it's called Quit Lit, but basically this whole part of literature that's focused on sort of moderating or rethinking our drinking. So these are 4 pretty common books, 4 that I read for this presentation. Very good books. Other sources or resources that are maybe needed to help guide you along the journey, I will provide my contact information. And if you wanted to reach out and have any further questions that you don't want to present in the chat, that is more than welcome. And I think we'll go and we'll look and see if we have any questions from the chat.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was a great presentation, so informative. For anyone who can't stay for questions, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope we'll see you again soon at another Wellness Matters webinar.